Hey, thanks for tuning in. I wanted to create a channel that's dedicated to paranormal stories. There's a lot of paranormal activity happening all around the world, and there's not a lot of people that are talking to people about their paranormal experiences, but every single day, millions of people all around the world do have paranormal experiences, and I want to start talking about them. I want to start sharing people's stories, so that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to reference these stories from a place called Reddit in Reddit/paranormal. That's what I think I'm going to do. I'm just going to read them out and I'm going to talk and share about my thoughts and my opinions on these things because I can and I'm going to. So I don't know if this is going to be a podcast series or just a video that you can listen to when you're about to go to sleep. I always enjoy like ghost stories, Bigfoot stories, UFO stories, alien abductions, government conspiracies. I like these things. I like to listen to these things before I go to sleep. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start creating some things that I can listen to, maybe even listen to myself while I tell these stories and talk about my thoughts and my opinions. This channel is called Just Paranormal. If you are interested in the paranormal, then I will be just covering the paranormal here. And so the first story that we're going to start off with is a story that was told by a person named Laoir, something like that, Laoir. And they're sharing this story called "My Dead Son Sent Me a Sign Telling Me He Was Okay." They started off by saying, "I would really like to share this experience with you guys. I've never told anyone about this before because when I talk about stuff like this, people look at me like I'm just nuts, and I'm not. A little backstory on my son. He died when he was 3 years old back in 2018. He had cancer and battled it all his life. Fast forward to 2020, I was living in a house with my mom and sister and her boyfriend. We were sitting in our garage one night and all of a sudden we saw the light flickering on a shelf in the very back of the garage. My sister's boyfriend went to go see what it was. The light was coming from one of my mom's old phones that was sitting in the spot for 2 years. It was all busted up and had never been charged in those 2 years. My sister's boyfriend picked it up and it stopped blinking. We tried to turn it on, but it was dead. We didn't think anything of it at first and sat down to one of my son's Mickey Mouse coloring books. As soon as that phone touched his coloring book, it started flashing again. He picked it up and it stopped flashing, set it down again on the coloring book, and again it started flashing. At this point, I was calling out to my son to see if it was him. I was asking him to give me a sign of it being him, and then the phone turned on. There was a random jumble of letters and numbers on the screen, but right there amongst the jumbled letters and numbers, it said Mickey Mouse. At that point, I knew it was him. I cried hysterically. We all did. We went inside with the phone and showed my mom and told her what had happened, and she couldn't believe it. This phone stopped flashing and I held it for a few hours to see if it would do it again. We were all about to go to bed, so my sister stood up and turned off the living room light. I set the phone down on our fireplace in the living room by a little cross and Bible. We were all about to go to our rooms when the lights on the phone came on. The light on the phone was pointed directly at the cross and casting a big shadow on the cross. The shadow of the cross covered one side of the entire living room wall. All of our mouths dropped wide open. We all knew he was showing us a sign that he was okay. We all prayed together and talked to him that night. After that, the phone never turned on again, never flashed a light again either. I tried to charge it the next day and it never turned on. This is one of many experiences we've had since he's died. Just let me know there is more out there. Oh, it just lets me know that there is more out there than we will ever be able to understand. Isn't that so true, folks? Like, there's just so much going on in the world that is invisible to our eyes that we don't necessarily understand. But there it is, what a great, wonderful story about confirmation of life after death. And, my heart goes out to you as well. The family dealing with anyone in your life that you love that passed away, that's really rough. You know what I mean? Like that's terrible. It's horrible, and I don't wish it upon anyone, but every one of us have to go through that at some point or another in our life. The next story that I'm going to talk about is stories of my childhood in a Victorian era pioneer funeral home. They write, and this is from Toonton Dreamer. Hello. I suppose these wouldn't be proper ghosts if they didn't still haunt me, at least in my thoughts and dreams. These events all took place in the late 80s and early 90s in a sleepy little logging and former gold mining boomtown named Monroe, Washington. We lived in a large 2-story late Victorian home built in about 1870. I don't know how to tell this right, so I'll just start off and go chronologically. In 1988, the tenants who rented the house before us disappeared. They left in their car apparently, but left everything behind and never came back. Wedding photos, birth certificates, just up and left. We got the house because of that vacancy. In 1989, I'm running around the backwoods. The house sits on 5 acres of former ranch land, now overgrown woods and evergreens. I find a huge stump that has a door on it. I open it. Inside there's a broken, rotting chair. There's barbed wire strung tight across the entrance about 4 inches off the ground as well. There's a little chunk of wood used as a table with a broken set of very old glasses. Think lead fused wire frames and small round glass. There's also a rusty revolver in the dirt and old leather shoes. I suddenly get this intense feeling that I'm being watched, and I leave the log hut and start running. If this were the only event, I would chalk it up to being a scared kid, but it wasn't. In 1989, a child's bike shows up on our doorstep. It's covered in dust, the grimy, sticky kind, and is in the form of the 1960s or older wide banana seat. My parents asked the whole neighborhood. No one knows whose bike it is or where it could have come from. One neighbor, an old lady who never came to say hi when moved in, showed up outside but refused to come in. She explained to my mother that the house was haunted, extremely, and that these things start to happen to every new tenant. She then asked if the landlord ever came inside. Nope, he would wait outside. She also explained a woman lived there her whole life from the late 1800s to the death of her in 1970s. Ladies and gentlemen, that's quite a long lifetime if you ask me, but I'll just keep reading here. She apparently was really crazy, held up seances, buried stuff all over the property, generally regarded as a spiritual nutcase. But people took it seriously, and her legacy was still strong in the 1990s. In 1990, our pet birds suddenly are killed and found on the doorstep. The cage was still locked inside the house. Later in 1990, I'm laying in bed watching my glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling when something in the middle of my room catches my eye. It looks like smoke seeping out of the walls, but it's streaming from multiple directions to a center, and then beginning to form into these pillars of smoke. The pillars began to bob up and down in place. Then continuing that motion, they began to also spin in clockwise motion, like it was slung out by centrifugal motion. A pillar of smoke floated over to me from the circle. It stopped at the foot of my bed. It began to form into a person, and this person looked like a miner. Beard, weathered hat, period clothes. I could even see the wrinkles on his face. He leaned down and put his hands on the bedboard like he was really taking in my features. The lights turned on suddenly and they all disappeared. It was my parents who said they felt funny and wanted to check on me. I'll write more if anyone cares. We lived there from the mid-90s, and there was a lot of other things that happened. Well, I really do hope that you take some time, Tutanini Dreamer, to share more of your stories there. That's pretty fascinating stuff. Super creepy when a person is observed watching you. You know what I mean? Like those shadow beings, especially because you got a lot of detail. You know, think about the people that don't get any detail and don't necessarily know it's a ghost, and it's more of a shadow person. You know, those shadow people are super freaky indeed. This next one surely is going to frighten us, I think. All these stories here, I have never read. I'm just reading them now. This is totally off the cuff, and I certainly hope that if you're into this kind of stuff, and if you're posting your stuff to Reddit at our Paranormal, then chances are I might actually start reading some of these stories. All right, so this one is posted by a person called The Bird is the Word. And they said in the title, my cousin got possessed for 9 days and was exorcised. I was 9 when it happened. Demonic activity is what it's labeled. Ooh, this is freaky stuff. The demonic stuff is super freaky, right? I totally believe that there's evil entities and evil spirits out there. Negative energy is what I kind of classify it all to being. And positive energy, obviously, is the opposite of that. But not many people sharing a lot of positive stories, although, you know, the first one I read there about the person who had some affirmations from their dead child. I mean, you know, holy geez, how great is that? I would be brought to tears as well in that circumstance. Anyway, back to this story here. I have my own fair share of scary experiences, mostly paranormal, such as seeing a red eye poke out in the tall grass, Santa toy fell and turned on, but it doesn't have batteries, and witnessed 2 possessions. One in my classroom and one during our field trip, but the other one that I'll never forget lasted about a week. Long post ahead. It was early November in 2009, and we just finished celebrating All Souls Day, or the Day of the Dead, here in the Philippines. We lived in a small subdivision surrounded by kind neighbors, so we didn't really expect things to turn south that fast. It was just me, my brother, my mom, my dad, my grandfather, and cousin, who's been living in this house for about 6 months, and so far, so good. My mom's store is doing great. First time being able to watch Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon, and I've just started my Pokemon Fire Red playthrough when it happened. My cousin told us that about hearing voices at night and constant banging she feels underneath her bed. We shrugged it off as some nightmare, and days passed until she brought it up again. But this time, she woke up nearby the stairs at 3 in the morning, and that actually made my parents a little worried. I was a kid, so I wasn't actually scared. To be honest, I'm actually pretty pumped to experience my first actual paranormal activity. My brother, on the other hand, was quiet for some reason. What my cousin told us the next day actually sent shivers down my spine. She was taking a bath when she poured water on her back. It parted ways like someone or something was on her back. Initially, it wasn't that scary, but I was reminded of Shudder, and boy, that scared me to death when we watched it. The scene on the ladder. It was then that my brother admitted that he can see spirits, actually shadow and light figures, and my dad actually experienced participating in an exorcism when he was still young. That events that proceeded to unfold are just horrifying thinking about it now that I'm older. We had our first exorcism, and it wasn't what I expected it to be. She was just lying on the bed and saying weird stuff. I actually hoped that she'd levitate or rotate her head, like in that one movie. She was able to rip a page from the Bible before becoming stable. My brother heard voices of different genders and age. What's worse is that when she slept in our room, since she's cursed or something, she slept below the side where I usually sleep in, and in that moment, I never wanted to sleep as fast in my entire life. The thought of opening your eyes and seeing she's floating above you or staring directly at you in the face. Ugh. The next day was kind of tame. My cousin was doing fine, and my grandpa just happened to see a lady in a black veil coming down the stairs into the kitchen, which was just an extension of the house. I was outside at that time as well as my parents and brother, so not the type of news we'd want to hear. The next day, that was the grand finale, good versus evil, as I watched everything unfold while eating a bowl of pancit Canton noodles. It was the worst she's ever been physically, and it looked terrifying. She started doing incantations, to which my dumb 10-year-old brain responded with more made-up incantations. I didn't really take any of this serious at all. They decided to cleanse her room, which was even more harder to do because of her brother participating in the cleanse and eventually getting possessed too. He looked at one of the images of my grandmother, to which he described the eyes turning black, and that's when he lost control. He was friggin' strong, being able to take on my dad and a priest's assistant. Eventually, she threw up a black necklace and decided to do a kill it on the dance floor, as witnessed by my kid brain. She looked into the mirror, and just like that, it was over. They took care of the mirror, and she was brought into church rehab. We didn't realize how many spectators we had outside of the house. We discovered that the owner of the house performed a ritual after the extension, so yeah, we had to move out. I'm just glad that I'm glad it's just the haunted. I'm just glad that it's the house that's haunted. She's doing fine now, and so are we. According to some of our ex-neighbors, they still see figures inside her room when they walk past. Wow, super freaky, right? You know, when it comes down to exorcisms of people, you don't necessarily know what's going on, and so ultimately, if it is a spiritual possession, you need some kind of higher authority or higher power to go ahead and combat these things, right? Even though you might not believe in that higher power, so to speak, that higher power still exists and still believes in you. And so does the negative energy. In fact, the negative energy is typically using us and feeding on us and our electrical output. See, we put out energy, right? And that energy is food for lower energy beings, and the easiest way to feed on that energy is to make sure that the person that you're feeding on is also operating in a lower energy dimension or a lower frequency. So when that happens, it just makes it a lot easier for them to subtly place thoughts in your brain, but also to eat and feed on that negative energy that they're inducing in that way. One thing that you could do, even if you didn't really believe in a higher power, there are certain relics, there are certain things that you could do yourself in your own home to cleanse that home, such as burning any kind of sage or any kind of cedar or any kind of sweet grass. When you do that, it actually has a cleansing property, not only in the environment that you're doing it in, but it also does on a spiritual level as well. For some reason, there's spirits, and especially angry, negative spirits, they can't handle the smoke. There's just some kind of cleansing about it. But ultimately, if you're looking to get rid of it 100% for sure, you need the help of a spiritual power, or you need to reach out to someone who has the ability to vanquish spirits, or to be able to even perceive and see spirits in your home, to know that whatever efforts you're going through and making, whatever strides you're trying to make, that you in fact have cleaned it out, so to speak. And you know, it made me think as well when it comes down to the spirit communication on that cell phone, when we were talking about that cell phone showing off signs that, you know, more than likely it was the dead son. You know, that's very interesting itself. If that cell phone didn't exist and none of the items that were in the old home that they were living in prior to, moving, if none of those items came with them, would that spirit actually be able to track down the family? I personally think so. I think that although spirits and or energies can have attachments to things, I think they also have the ability to travel as well. With that being said, let's get into another story here. These are pretty cool, right? I like doing this. And you know what? People took a lot of time out of their day to go ahead and share these experiences. So I think it's kind of cool to be able to talk about them and share them and maybe reach a wider audience as well. This one was spoken about by Landry Audio. What's the history and efficiency of sage and salt when it comes to removing and preventing spirits? When reading stories of hauntings and poltergeist activity, I frequently read comments about holding a sage ceremony to cleanse the area of spirits. In rarer accounts, I've even read about salting doorways and windows to prevent the entrance of spirits. Does anyone know the history on these things and how they became known as perceived remedies? Is there any information on why something as simple as sage and salt have the ability to ward off spirits, even from like religious leaders, like priests, when they could not? So again, when it comes down to the sage, right, there are spiritual properties or energetic properties, and there's different states. Like everything has a different state, right? When you're a kid, you learn about the different stages of water and how water can be a physical item, it can be a gaseous item, and so it kind of takes you through the ways in which water becomes, it becomes into spirit, so to speak, right? If you can wrap your head around that. It's the same for any kind of human beings. It's the same for any kind of animals that happen to find themselves thinking about and identifying with self, almost like a realization that I am. When that realization happens, that animal actually, when it reincarnates or passes away, it's going to come back as a beginning soul, like a new soul that is discovering the realm that we exist in at this point. And what we're trying to do eventually is discover the higher realm, to not actually come back as a physical being, but to remain as an energetic being and continuing to climb up the dimensional realms, so to speak, or to increase your frequency or to get higher with the most positive, loving energy, light. So same with the smoke and the physical entity as sage. I don't know where it came from. This could have been a practice for thousands of years. This is the way I kind of equate it to, is that a lot of times in religious texts, there's something called a burnt offering made. And the burnt offering made is where your prayers are being carried up by the smoke that you're burning of whatever stuff you're burning, and as it burns, the smoke goes up into the air and is carried to the heavens, and so forth, your message as well, right? And so when I think about native practices, and this is where I learned about sage, was from native practices. Natives believe that there's energy all around, like the first peoples, right? The peoples that didn't have kings and queens tell them how their life is, the people that didn't even record their stories onto paper, that just told them over and over and over and over and over again, the people that saw the world as a spiritual world, as a living entity, and had respect for Mother Nature and had respect for the invisible beings that are there and out there, such as the Bigfoot. And they had a lot of other tricksters and stuff like that you don't necessarily hear about too often, but the ones we majority hear about are Bigfoot and skinwalkers. And so at the end of the day, these spiritual shaman guys would ingest a lot of different kinds of things that would take them to metaphysical realms, and when they ingested these things, they probably learned more about the energy properties of everything. And so they somehow, some way discovered that burning these items are a way of protecting yourself. They would do so. They would have a conch shell. They would have a feather that they found, and they would literally do that kind of stuff. You can go anywhere in the world that these things are growing and pick them for free and dry them out and then make your own bundles. I do that quite a bit myself with cedar, as cedar is definitely, readily available to me. And I've always wanted to know what sweetgrass looks like. I know that it's grass. I know that it grows everywhere. I can even smell it when I'm driving along the highway, and it's springtime or summer, and the tractors have come and cut the side of the highway there. When that happens, I can smell that sweetgrass, but I don't know specifically. I can't find it. I don't know what it looks like. I've tried picking different kinds of grasses and smelling them. I need a spiritual person who knows a lot about plants to take me on a walk in my region and show me what sweetgrass is, where it grows, what it looks like, just so that I can start making them myself. I love that kind of stuff. And again, I encourage people to definitely sage your environment, sage yourself as a form of protection. I also try and teach people and talk to them about imagining white light surrounding you and using that as your protection. Because, protection is super important. Once you realize that there's a spiritual realm out there and that you could be attacked at any time by negative energies, and that you could use positive energies to counter the negative energies, all of a sudden your world expands, right? Your consciousness expands. The way you view yourself in the world expands. And it becomes a little bit more than just eat, breathing, working, doing monotonous things, sleeping, reproducing, and then dying. It's more than that. It really is. And I think that it's important that we always keep that at the forefront of our mind. I'm going to share another story here, another couple, I think, and then we'll probably call it a wrap because it's already at 30 minutes. And I'm not even too sure if people are interested in this. This story comes from a person named Rolls Royce Ralph. And this is the title: My ex and I have not seen him in 2 years. Had the same dream and it's weirding me out. We just recently got back into regular contact. I'm not too sure, but I knew this was going to happen a few months ago. I had a strong intuitive feeling. He texted me this morning and asked if I know someone or have a roommate named Cole, and that he just dreamt for the first time in 6 months and is trying to figure out why. Then I told him no, but he was in my last dream. Then we discovered we had the same dream. His dream was that he came to my apartment. He didn't tell me all the details, but said we had a conversation. Then he said he sensed someone else was there, and I said to him, Cole saw you. I don't know about a Cole, nor was there mention of one in my dream, but my dream was that I was sleeping and woke up to him peeking through my bedroom window, or my bedroom door, where we both taken back and took a bit to kind of scan each other's faces, just stared at each other. Then we simultaneously felt like this sensation of relief. I went and got dressed, and we walked to the door together, and he gave me flowers. He said he remembers peeking through my door in the dream. This is throwing my ass for a loop because I'm still in love with him, and he just confirms the spiritual connection I have known we've had all along. Well, nothing like leaving dreams and the interpretation of dreams to lead you to your spiritual connection of love. I find it very interesting, and this is something that, because I believe in spirit, both good and bad, I also believe we have lots of abilities ourselves to manifest. And I feel like a lot of times in our lifetime and experiences, we have these strands and bands of energy that connect us, and no matter how far we are away from each other, and when we go ahead and consciously think about each other in any way, shape, or form, especially think of like when you're thinking about someone and all of a sudden you're calling them or they're calling you, there's a reason for that. It's like our metaphysical telephone getting in touch with each other. I think that's a really cool story, and I really like that. I wish you much luck with that. The next one is from a person named Turtle64. They say, weird things happening and feeling watched. Backstory: I was just 5 years old when I moved with my grandparents. They lived in an apartment where the last resident hung herself. My grandpa was a drunk and my grandma had many jobs. She wasn't home at night. I spent my night alone because my grandpa had passed out. I always felt like something was watching me. I moved in my first apartment when I was 15. Weird as it sounds, the last resident died in that apartment before I moved here. Present moment, I have encountered weird events in my whole life. Doors opening, footsteps, unexplained noises and sounds, time after time. I am used to this over the years. There were times when nothing happened for years, until now, and this time it feels even more hostile. Events started out about a few months back. I have moved many times in these years, and I have lived in this apartment for about 2 years now. I heard footsteps at night, weird banging in the doors and walls, doors opening by themselves. That feeling when someone is watching you is back, but it doesn't feel the same. It feels like it's chasing me. I've tried to catch something on video, but with no luck. What do you think this can be? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you answer in the comments here of this video, what could this possibly be? For me, what I'm thinking is something's really trying to get a hold of you or to get your attention, and now that you're acknowledging it, you're starting to feed into the energy that is whatever that is. If your energy and your body energy mechanics are picking up that this is a hostile thing, then you're going to feel it. Just like if you were walking in a jungle and all of a sudden you heard a tiger or some kind of predatory animal using those low vibrational infrasound. When they're using infrasound, your body is going to have a natural reaction to it, and it should be the flight mechanism reaction that you're looking for. This is something that we probably lost touch with thousands of years ago, but it still is active in us. We used to be people of the world, and we used to live in the world, and we'd feel, we'd be hunters and gatherers, and we'd have to be way more in tune with nature, and that's just something that's always going to be there. And when you get that feeling in your house, like you're being watched, and then you get that feeling, the chances are that that actual feeling is true. And so again, when it comes down to it, the best thing that you could practice is saging your house, saging yourself, saying little prayers in the morning, trying to visualize white protection, because doing those things will help you in whatever spiritual circumstance you find yourself in. Thanks for tuning in. If you are interested in tuning in continually, I should be doing this a lot more. I hope you've enjoyed what I said, the stories I've read. I thank you so much, everybody, for sharing your stories on this thread. I've been paying attention to this thread for a long time, and this is something I've always wanted to do, so I'm just going to start doing it. As you could hear there, my man Archie, that's my one kitty there. I got two kitties, Archie and Luna, and they might pop in and say what's up every now and again. Thanks again for tuning in. Subscribe, like, follow, all that kind of stuff, please, if you can. And I appreciate you. I hope you're having a good day. If you have any issues, please feel free to reach out. If you have a story you want to share, that you want to kind of have bumped to the top of the list of the stories that I'm just going to randomly pick throughout the day that I choose to record this, please, by all means, message out. And, thanks a lot for listening. Peace.